We have Mary Sweeney, Trejo, Tim Hunter, Rich Robinson, Jeff Moore, Frank Byers, cast members Al Strobel and Piper Laurie. Oh, we have 5 mics, so we can just kind of share them. Thank you all for coming. So, Piper, I thought I'd start with you since, we see in these episodes the return of Catherine. And I'm curious to know, at the end of the cliffhanger that we were left with at the end of season 1, how you and Mark and David had sort of discussed the future of that character.
Forgive me, my hearing isn't terrific. So, could somebody repeat that for me?
What discussions had you had with the writers at the end of the first season about the future of your character?
None. Except the only one after the first season, David Lynch called me at home and said, I want you to think about the character you want to play. We want the audience to think that perhaps you've been burned up in the fire at the sawmill. And I want you to come back as a man and make trouble for the town and everyone, and we'll let people think that you're dead, and we'll take your name off the credits. And I thought that was his way of firing me. And then he said, you pick the kind of man you want to be, a Mexican or Frenchman or whatever. So it was so much wonderful, delicious gift to be able to do that. No, I decided at that time that Japanese would be less predictable. But that was the only input I had about material. And the big thing about my disguise was that it was very important to David that I not reveal, or anyone reveal this to anyone in the cast or crew. No one was to know about it.
And you also managed to keep it a secret while doing interviews in character. Is that right? You spoke with journalists as Tajimura?
I'm having... Oh, yes, I did. I had a few days off, and a writer for the Hollywood Reporter called and wanted an interview because he admired my character, and he spoke to Paul Ishimatsu, and he said, I really like that character Piper's playing, and no, yeah, that's what he did. And she said, well, all right. She set up an interview, and when he got to the studio, she said, I'm so sorry, but, I'm sorry, it's been a while since bear with me. She said, for some reason I couldn't do the interview, and she pushed the new character in the show on him. And would you like our visitor from Japan, who works only with Kurosawa? And Paula had written an elaborate biography for Fumio Yamaguchi. And so he said, all right. So he came to the studio, and she greeted him and said, well, I'm so sorry, but Fumio was very exhausted from yesterday's work, and he didn't come in, and he's resting at home, but he'll speak to you on the phone. And so I was downstairs, and they put him on the phone, and we had, 20-minute conversation, and with the interpreter, and it was very elaborate. And afterwards, I went upstairs to Mark Frost's office, and the writer was there, and in a conversation, I sort of slowly began to talk about some of the things we talked about on the telephone, and he finally realized that it was me, and it was quite a bizarre response. We fell on the floor. And
so for Tim and Frank, I'm curious to talk a little bit about the episode that we just finished watching, because there's a lot of expressive cinematography in that episode, and I'm curious to know a little bit about the way that you worked together, how you discussed, how you wanted to shoot some of those scenes. There's some Dutch angles, there's some shots from above that I think really tell the story very well. What was that to translate the story from the page into the cinematography of that episode?
You first.
I could remember. From the get-go, from the first episode that I did, there wasn't a plan really, other than to do things that were different than what had been on television, and I think also that different from nowadays. A lot of that show was shot on wide-angle lenses, and it was shot on primes too. I don't think we used the zoom very much at all, once in a while. But it was shot on primes, and it was shot single camera. So we were able to get the camera and the lens fairly close to the actors, and I think that was something that played out through the whole 29 episodes. And the Dutch angles and whatever, I think came more from Tim than came from me. Maybe you can remember.
Yeah, well, David and Mark were very supportive. I'm sure you've heard this from other people. Very encouraging to really just go and make the show the way you wanted to make the show. And I think for many of the directors on Twin Peaks, it was an opportunity to shoot episodic television in the most personal way, much more so than you usually get to do. And I had done an earlier episode, and although all of us that had, especially in the first season, I think were really following the whole series and everybody's episodes with a great concentration and a lot of interest, and so we designed our stuff. That's all. I did some. I also was struck by the intensity of the close-ups in this episode. But the stuff I remember, stuff that you just executed so beautifully, where the big long pan downs through the trees, and and obviously the scene with Leland and Donna and the stuff under the sprinkler system. And yeah, those wide-angle lenses really give it something different, because when it falls back, it just falls back to something quite different from what you usually see in a normal master. Mm-hmm. There was good stuff in it.
Also, the length of the shots were allowed to play out, and I think that was a big factor in being able to shoot the way that we did. It wasn't cut. Oftentimes things played out in longer takes, and I think that was one of the things that gave the mood to the show. And Also, we were able to, because it was one camera, we were able to light or compose specifically for every shot. We weren't locked into trying to make two cameras work all the time, which is basically what you do on series TV nowadays.
I forgot that it was single.
One camera.
Single camera, and because I can't remember the last time I shot with one camera, and you know, and you see it because you keep coming back to the same setups. You don't have that B camera extra angle that quote unquote breaks it up, but it gives it a kind of simplicity of style and potentially a kind of purity of style that certainly worked with the material. This is Paul Trejo, who edited it. Frank Byers, of course, who shot it. And you could speak to long takes also.
Yeah, it's nice to revisit this because I haven't seen some of these in 20 years. But I'm really impressed by, you know, the thing that sticks with me is the rhythm of the show. And like Frank was saying today, it's probably virtually impossible unless it's maybe one of the cable non-commercial channels, like AMC or HBO, that you'd have the opportunity to allow moments to play and not have some executive over your shoulder saying cut, 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 move it on and make it quicker. And, you know, also, in addition to that was Angela's score, which, you know, was positively brilliant. And,
that's one thing that I wanted to say before. I'm quite happy to hold my peace, and you can all talk about episode 7, which is the unsung hero for me, in addition to all you sung heroes, was Laurie, the music editor, who I gather is going to be here at the next event. And this was just an extraordinary music editor. And what was interesting about the whole process there is that Badalamenti wrote his cues for the show at the beginning of the season, really before the season even started, and he just sent in, you know, a bunch of cues, and he didn't really want to write. He didn't want to score the individual episodes. It was very difficult to get him to write an individual cue for whatever episode was being completed at the time. But Laurie had the library of all of the Badalamenti cues, and what she wound up doing with this library, she would run the stuff half speed, she would run it backwards, she would edit the cues completely, you know, so that they just worked in all kinds of different combinations and the different from the way that they had been written. And she created basically the score out of a couple of dozen cues that Badalamenti sent in at the beginning of the season. Most extraordinary. It was really, really fun to work with her on the music editing.
you're right. I mean, it's really interesting that she completely scored it because he never wrote the picture at all.
Yeah.
And she, while we were sort of stuck in the moviola chem world of film, Laurie also was pioneering in a very early, I don't even remember the name of it, but some sort of early electronic music editing device. And
yeah, some early Pro Tools.
Exactly, and like Tim said, she really is, I would say, a co-composer. I mean, by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, boy, that was fun putting the music on it.